Hello, YouTube viewers. Miles here with Miles on Cars. I just posted a video a little while ago on the green 69 Corvette Corgi toy. And I've always had a bunch of different die casts here and there, but actually a few of them I've sold off, or most of them for that matter. But this time I thought I'd show you something a little different than a Corvette. This is a die cast model of a 64 Fairlane Thunderbolt, a Ford Fairlane. I actually owned one of these cars many years ago, not a Thunderbolt, but I had a 64 Fairlane, a post Fairlane, not a hardtop, a post body style like this. So it was a Thunderbolt body, but it wasn't a real Thunderbolt. It was a 289 small block car. In any case, I have this die cast of a 64 Thunderbolt. It's just really cool. I just thought I'd do a few minutes on it and talk about Thunderbolts. I don't know a whole lot about Thunderbolts as I do some other stuff. I've had a lot of 66, 67 Fairlanes. I've had about 7 or 8 of those. I have a 66 hardtop Fairlane now, 2-door hardtop with a original 6-cylinder car. It's got a built small block in it now with a reverse manual valve body C4 and all kinds of fun stuff. So I'll get to that sometime down the road, but in the meantime I wanted to show this, I guess you could call it a vintage burgundy Thunderbolt. I'm not 100% sure on the Thunderbolt production. I believe there was only 111 of them made, or it might be 100. I'm open to correction if you want to, anybody out there that really knows Thunderbolts. I'd be curious to know exactly what the color breakdown was, but I believe they might have made, there were a few of them, a number of them were black, some of them were white, and I'm pretty sure some of them were also sold in this color, which would basically be vintage burgundy. So anyway, this is the die cast of a Thunderbolt, and it's a, trying to think here what it's a, I believe it's a Maisto yeah, here you go. It's a Maisto die cast, and the scale on it is 1/24, 64 Fairlane Thunderbolt. It's pretty good size model. So it has some detail under the hood here, underneath the car, that is. The oil pan, lower control arms, front sway bar, shows a transmission, automatic or 4-speed. Again, I believe some of these cars came with automatics and some of them came with 4-speeds. I probably should brush up a little bit on my Thunderbolt history, but I haven't gotten to the point I have with some of the other stuff, like with the 66 7 Fairlanes, and my Mustang knowledge on vintage and late model is fairly respectable, probably more so than these Thunderbolts. Although I know one thing I can tell you about these now, Thunderbolts, the real ones are worth a fortune. You know, I think they're, $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 pretty readily. So this die cast is pretty cool. I don't know where it came from. I think a friend of mine gave it to me. But I was like, okay, I'll take it. So because being that I had this body style car years ago, but again, like I said, I've gotten to be more interested in the newer Fairlanes, specifically 66 and 67s, the 2-door hardtops. Speaking of which, there's a really good Facebook page for those cars. 66, 67 Fairlane Nation, I think it's called, or something like that. But anyway, getting back to these early cars, the 63s and 4s are pretty popular among vintage Ford guys, who are into other stuff besides Mustangs. And the 66 7s are, again, very popular. And then you go back to the 65s, which are, some people are not quite as excited about those as the 67s and or the 3s and the 4s. So getting back to this particular die-cast model, it's got some neat detail on it. It has the emblems on the roof right here, the Ford crest, which is kind of cool. The doors open, which is kind of cool. Although I will say, I think, if I'm not mistaken, the doors on this car, I just noticed right now, they should have a frame going up and around the window, unless the car was a hardtop. And this car is not a hardtop, it's a post. But it does not have the framed doors. So that's an interesting little detail I just kind of realized. But the doors open and shut, which is kind of cool. The seats actually have, the bucket seats actually move a little bit, but not as much as you might think. The interior detail is okay. I like the dash-mounted tack. That's kind of cool, which I believe some of these cars had. I had a 63.5 Falcon Sprint once a few years ago, and it had a dash-mounted tack. And so the doors open, the trunk doesn't. I like the license plate on the back, Hot 427. You got to like that. So the doors, passenger door, will show that. That opens, shows a little more of the interior. Looks like there's like another gauge there under the dash. I don't know if that might be probably oil pressure or water temperature or something like that. That would be the usual thing on something like this. So, but the big stuff on a Thunderbolt is under the hood. That's it. That 427 FE dual quad 427 stuffed into the fenders of a smallish 64 Fairlane to make one of the most legendary Ford drag racers pretty much ever produced. So this car has the air inlet, the air cleaner that goes over the dual quads, and then the tubes that go down to the high beam. There would normally be the high beam headlights on a lesser 64 Fairlane. The Thunderbolts were actually a factory equipped this way. I believe these cars were built by Dearborn Steel Tubing, and they also came equipped with the teardrop hood, which was a real pretty cool deal. There are different companies that offer teardrop hoods for other Ford models. I believe Kreitz makes a teardrop hood for Kreitz Industries. I think they make one for 66, 67 Fairlanes, and there are a couple of other aftermarket outlets I think out there that you can get a teardrop hood for like a 64 or 65 Falcon. So kind of a neat thing to consider. So there you have it. 64 Fairlane Thunderbolt, Hot 427 plate in the front, like in the back. California, where all the cool stuff was going down back in those days. These cars were the real deal in 1964 and basically replaced the lightweight Galaxies that we were running. You know, the 63 and 64 Galaxies had the 406 and the 427s. You know, R-code Galaxies. I have a couple of friends that own a couple of real R-code Galaxies. 64s. I think actually one is a 64, and I have another friend with a 63, lightweight Galaxies. But they don't have a Thunderbolt. I actually, in fact, another friend of mine has an R-code Fairlane, a 67 R-code Fairlane, which is in fact vintage burgundy, just like this car. But these guys don't have Thunderbolts. These things are pretty rare, pretty big dollar deal, and you don't see them around very often. So I thought it would be fun to touch a little bit on what these cars were in terms of this diecast itself and actual real Thunderbolts as they were built for that year. I believe after 64 they kind of were, the big hot thing in 65 was like the AFX Comets, and they were then in the 66, 67 R-code Fairlanes, which were 427s. Those were pretty popular with the drag racers, like the white 66 R-code Fairlanes. They only made 57 of those. They were all bench seat 500 models. And then in 67, the R-code Fairlanes were available in a bunch of other colors, but still they were extremely rare cars. They made those in 500 bench seat cars, and also my friend of mine has a vintage burgundy. His car's a 500 XL, so it's got bucket seats and a console. So these Thunderbolt cars were, the red hot thing in 64, and probably, I think they were very, very competitive, or, pretty fairly competitive a year or two after that. But, back in those days, NHRA and Ford, they were always kind of moving on to the next model pretty quickly. And then, of course, in 68 is when the Cobra Jet Mustangs came out, and those were really a real big deal. The white 135 code Cobra Jet 68 fastback Mustangs, and then of course of those cars, the production cars were all GTs, but the original 50 Cobra Jet cars that were made, the white ones, those actually were non-GTs. But anyway, wanted to show you a 64 Thunderbolt, pretty stodgy looking body style, not real slick, but that's part of the appeal of it. It's kind of got the looks of a bulldog. It's kind of like, sexy ugly, if you want to call it that way. To my mind, it's just like still one of the coolest hot rods ever made from the early to mid 60s. So wanted to show that, and hope you enjoyed it. And thanks for watching.